Hello and welcome to this week's instalment of the Pundits Preview. I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Ian Mitchelmore, the Swansea City correspondent. Ian, how are you first of all? Are you okay?
Yeah, very well. Thank you, Adam, and thanks very much for having me on.
Yeah, no problem at all. I wanted to start this conversation by discussing Swansea's excellent start to the season. Obviously, missing out on the playoffs, it can have an adverse effect on teams. How do you think they went about preparing this season to make sure they got such a good start?
Yeah, it was a really tough one to take because obviously they got in at the last minute with that fantastic win at Reading, and then Brentford, they're a fantastic side. So I think they were always the underdogs in that two-legged tie, and to try and pick yourselves back up again, second season under Steve Cooper, and try and mount another promotion push was always going to be tricky. But I think the key for me has been the likes of Joe Rodon, Matt Grimes, Connor Roberts, these players who've come from the academy. They've taken the onus on themselves now, and they're no longer the youth players, they're considered the first team players. And credit to them, they've really stepped up to the plate, because there's been a massive turnover in the squad once again, as has been the case in the last few windows since they were relegated from the Premier League in 2018. So I think that's been the key, those sort of players really stepping up to the mark and basically putting that message out to Steve Cooper saying, well, we're not kids anymore. We're the ones that are going to do the business for you. And they've delivered so far. It's only 4 games in, a long way to go, but it's been a very positive start.
It's been a long process, hasn't it, from obviously relegation from the Premier League, rebuilding the squad, and then obviously Steve Cooper coming in as well. He had an excellent first year.
Yeah, he did, and there was a lot of concern, understandably so, because before that he'd only ever worked at youth level with Wrexham, Liverpool, and then of course a fantastic job with England under 17s, winning the World Cup with them in 2017 in India. So there was an element of the unknown because he'd never worked at senior level. So first job for him and a big test, but he went one better than Graham Potter. They got 5 points more than they did in that first season back in the Championship. And credit to Graham Potter as well. He played a big part in this transition because they lost a lot of experience when they dropped out of the Premier League. And those young players that I've already mentioned, they were thrown into the limelight really. And they've now got 2 years of experience under the belts. And this is their 3rd year now, which is probably why they're really starting to come into their own and finding their feet. So and Steve Cooper deserves a lot of credit for that because he's given them a lot of chances as well. And not just those I mentioned, but there's others, Jordan Garrick, Ben Cabango, who's now Wales international. They've been given their chances under him and they've repaid the faith. So it's been a 2-way process and it's certainly gone well so far.
Yeah, and you mentioned obviously Steve Cooper and his success with England's under 17s. That's bared fruits for Swansea as well, hasn't it? Obviously last year, Rhian Brewster came on loan. This year, Morgan Gibbs-White, who he worked with at youth level with England. It's really benefited the team.
Yeah, he's certainly made the use of his contacts. That we can definitely say that. Mark Gurhey, another one, who was here last season for the second half of the campaign. He signed on for a full season this time round, and he's gone from strength to strength. Conor Gallagher, who's now in the Premier League with West Brom, he was here last season. So it's testimony to how well Steve Cooper did with England, and those big clubs, Liverpool, Chelsea's, even Newcastle with Freddie Woodman. They trust Steve Cooper to give them game time in this division, and it's it's certainly benefited all parties, and more so the players, because they're getting regular game time, which they wouldn't get with the parent clubs at the moment, given their ages and lack of experience. So yeah, he's definitely made use of his contacts. Morgan Gibbs-White, you mentioned, he's the latest one, and he's had a really good start to the season, and fingers crossed he can continue that after the international break.
Yeah, 100%. I think the business in the transfer window hasn't gone unnoticed, has it? I think pundits have said how good pound to pound the window's been for Swansea. Talk us through how you think the squad's developed over this summer.
Yeah, like I said, there's been a lot of departures. So Nathan Dyer, club legend, he's been released. He is still training with the club, but he's no longer playing. Mike van der Hoorn, the most experienced centre-back, and lots of other fringe players as well. Christopher Peterson's not long been sold. So, there's been a massive turnover. And in terms of squad depth, it is very thin. But the players that they do have, there's very good quality in there. You look at Andre Ayew, scored a couple of goals for Ghana the other day against Qatar. So, he's played in World Cups, Champions League. He's vastly experienced. And, if we're being honest, he's probably too good for this level. But he is here. So players like him, there's a lot of quality in that team. The other younger ones I mentioned, Even Jamal Lowe, his rise through the ranks has been fantastic, coming from Portsmouth then to Wigan and now to Swansea as well, a team that's challenging for promotion. So, they are showing ambition within their constraints, which is difficult because obviously finances at the moment are very tough for all championship sides in fairness, but particularly Swansea with parachute payments dwindling as Huddersfield only too well. So, but no, all in all, the signings they have made look very, very promising indeed, but they're probably lacking a couple more just for that bit of depth to challenge over a 46-game season.
Yeah, and talk us through the style of play. Has it changed much from last year?
It's been interesting actually, because after the restart in June, Steve Cooper switched to a back three. He used to play a back four, probably two holding midfielders and then three behind a main striker. So he's tweaked that a little bit. I think it was the fourth game after the restart in June or July against Sheffield Wednesday. And since they've gone to that system, they've picked up more points in the Championship than any other team. I think it's 27 out of 39 points. So it's been an incredible return with Ben Cabango, Mark Gurhey and Joe Roden as a back three. Obviously, Joe Roden heavily linked with a move away from the club. So it remains to be seen if he'll be at the club on Saturday to face Huddersfield. But he's been absolutely phenomenal in the middle of those three young players. And it is a young group, I must say. Those back three, I think the average age is about 21 and a half. So it just shows you where the club are at the moment. And then you've got Connor Roberts as a right wing back, Jake Bidwell on the opposite side. They give so much threat going forward. It just takes the pressure off the likes of Andre Ayew, Jamal Lowe, and even Morgan Gibbs-White in the number 10 role. So that tactical tweak that was done sort of the back end of last season, he stuck with that. And it certainly seems to be reaping the rewards because they've got 10 points out of 12 so far this season.
It almost sounds like the delay with fixtures actually benefited Steve Cooper in the sense that it gave him a longer period to sit down and make those tweaks.
Yeah, you're probably right there. I mean, they had such a good start last season. It was so unexpected because they weren't playing the best football in August. And, they beat Leeds to go top of the table and they had 16 points from the first 18. It was a dream start. And then things slowly started to dip and, the rigours of a brutal championship season started to take hold. But they still, such was the good start. They stayed in the mix all the way through. And I think sort of January, February onwards, just before lockdown, they started to find a bit of form again. Got a good draw at home with West Brom, which was the last game before the lockdown. Kept a clean sheet in that one and had the better chances. So they were just sort of starting to find their feet again. I think the break gave them a chance to get fitter, work on more things on the training ground, which obviously all clubs have the chance to do. But it definitely benefited Swansea because they came back and looked a different animal and, ended up getting in the top six by the skin of their teeth. So. And it's probably testimony to how they've started this season as well. So it certainly seems to have benefited Swansea more than others.
Yeah, and going forwards as well, there's goals popping up pretty much from everywhere, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, you take Rhian Brewster out of the team and you're going to lose a lot of goals, so you are relying on others. But, Morgan Gibbs-White's come in and scored on his debut against Preston. Jake Bidwell scored his first goal for the club the other day, and I think it was his 45th or 46th game. So, if he's chipping in, you're relying on Andre Ayew from a couple of penalties maybe as well. And then, if they can get someone on set pieces as well, that would be a big plus. They've got a lot of height at the back as well. So they are dangerous from corners as well. So, yeah, it needs to be shared out because they don't have a Rhian Brewster or someone that's going to get you that 20, 25 goals. Andre Ayew was sort of a one-man band last season up until January when Brewster came in. So, it almost has to be shared because they haven't got that person, like I said. So they've got Victor Gyökeres from Brighton on loan, so hopefully he can chip in with a few as well. Jamal Lowe being another one. He's already got his first one in the 2-0 win at Wycombe. So I think they're going to have to share it out really if they're going to have any chance of doing the same as last season.
Yeah, and defensively as well, 3 clean sheets in 4 games. Obviously, Freddie Woodman's yet to concede. He missed the last game. How secure and how tight are Swansea at the back? How difficult is it to break them down?
Incredibly difficult. I think teams have found that out already. And it was the same at the back end of last season, even in the entirety of last season, because teams, when they were losing games, it was rarely by more than 1 goal. I think there was only, off the top of my head, 2 games last season they lost by more than 1 goal in the Championship, not including the playoffs. So it's testimony to work that Steve Cooper and one of his coaches, Martin Margetson, who's worked in the England setup, they've worked heavily on things like set pieces, which were a massive Achilles heel under Graham Potter. They went from being the worst team for conceding set pieces in the 2018-19 season to being the best last year. So it shows you how much of an improvement they've made. And like I say, those names, Gurhey, Cabango, Roden, they've been excellent as a trio as well. And Freddie Woodman as well, he had an illness, so he missed the last game. Fingers crossed he can be back for this one. But as a four, they've been a massive part in keeping those clean sheets and making Swansea a really tough team to play against and particularly score against as well.
For Huddersfield Town fans watching this, where do you think Huddersfield could hurt Swansea? Where have they struggled against other opponents?
What I would say is in midfield, Matt Grimes and Corey Smith, they're a new partnership. They played all 4 games together so far this season, but Matt Grimes he's been such a consistent performer for Swansea in the 2 seasons in the Championship, and that there's been reported interest from Watford, and maybe, I'm reading too much into it, but maybe that's just sort of affected his performance in somewhat. He's not quite hit the heights, and that's testament to his own standards as well. He's set incredible standards in the Championship. So I think if teams can win the midfield battle against Swansea, they've got a really good chance of building and going forwards. The aerial threat, sometimes Freddie Woodman's not always been at his best, where Stephen Bender, who played against Millwall making his debut, he looked solid in that regard. So it depends who's going to be in goal this weekend. So yeah, the aerial threat could be another way to threaten Swans, I think.
Yeah, and just finally, obviously, Swansea's ambition this year to go straight back up.
Yeah, it has to be. If you're in the Championship, Huddersfield, I imagine they're the same. They're obviously at different stages, but having gone so close last season and try to attract these players who are, have got big ambitions of playing at the top level, I think that has to be the aim. It's going to be incredibly tough because, as I say, squad depth, it's very thin. I think after this international break, there's 7 games in 22 days.
Yeah.
Same after the next international break in November. So, what the squad looks like by December, January, who knows? It could be very, very thin if there's a couple of knocks. So if they can have a bit of fortune with injuries, who knows that they'll definitely be in the top half. And, if they get a bit of good fortune on the way, top 6 is definitely a chance.
Ian, that's absolutely fantastic. Thank you for giving us such a good insight into Swansea City.